Hello everyone, welcome to True Horror Anecdotes. Enjoy. I usually take things slow when it comes to online dating. I chat with the person until I feel comfortable, and then we meet in a public place. I always let my friends know where I am, just in case. I've had fun or not so great dates, but never any real problems. I've actually made some really good friends this way. Sometimes I just don't hear from the person again, and that's okay. No big deal. I recently met a guy on Plenty of Fish. We chatted a lot on the app and talked on the phone for hours. He seemed like a nice guy, so we decided to meet. He lives about 45 minutes away in a town, so it's a bit unfamiliar for me. We talked about me staying at his place, so we decided to get some drinks. I thought it might be better to get a room for myself instead of staying at his place right away. I don't know why, but I stopped thinking logically at some point because we left my car near a park. I had no clue how to get back to it from his place since he took so many turns during the drive. Then, he suggested I crawl into the back of his van because it's a small town and he didn't want anyone to see me. I should have turned around and walked back to my car right then. He even took my phone and put it in a box to hide its location. But I thought we were just having a fun conversation. Maybe playing a silly game based on how he talked before. When I visited his home, we watched movies, talked, and everything seemed normal. Then we had dinner. But at some point, he started acting strange. He asked a lot of questions in a kind of scary way, making me feel a bit uncomfortable. So I suggested he could drive me back to my car so I could go home, but he refused. He thought I was joking and told me to call a cab if I wanted to leave. At this point, I have my phone back and messaged a friend, just in case something went wrong. I knew how to get to my car from a certain point if she could pick me up. Okay, well, I decided to just sleep and get the night over with. And that's what eventually happened, and I made it home safely. But surprisingly, we kept talking afterward. Phone calls, texts, and we both agreed the first meeting was awkward. He apologized, and we decided to hang out again. It turned out much better. I felt at ease and we shared lots of laughs, so it was actually good. Also, this time I willingly stayed the night, feeling comfortable instead of trapped. He offered to get my pillow from my bag, and when he went to the other room, my makeup bag fell out. Then I fell asleep while we were talking. The next morning, he drove me to my car, but we didn't talk much during that time. Then I was busy being a bridesmaid and doing last-minute things. In the evening, he texted me again. So, when I was free around 2 a.m., which wasn't unusual for us, I texted him to see if he was awake and still wanted to talk. This is when he gets upset with me, asking about some script I supposedly have for him and what I really want. I was confused. What script is he talking about? I remind him that we agreed to start as friends and get to know each other. Then he calls me a stupid out-of-towner for carrying a makeup bag, saying it's some kind of act or smokescreen. He thinks it's sloppy, and my plan to call him later is a red flag for him. Even though he knew I had things to do, I was just thinking, It was easy for me to leave it all behind. Then a week later, I got a voicemail demanding a call right away. I was at work, so I simply ignored it. Later, when I tried to listen to it again after an hour, the message was gone. I knew I saved it. I even checked the erased messages, but it wasn't there. I assume it was him because the same thing happened with the message he left the following night. He said really bad things, just awful stuff. He said things like, "You come in here with your makeup bag full of gels and stuff, trying to collect evidence at my place to put people in trouble and hurt them. Go away and don't lie about sleeping in the bed next time or doing some detective work. I should slap you in the mouth." This has never happened to me before, and I'm not sure how to respond. I just hope it doesn't get worse. I'm not sure if any of you remember or not, but back in 2016, there was this creepy clown trend, where people dressed up as clowns and hung out in places after dark or scared people. My story happened on my college campus during that fall. Before going to school, I lived with my grandparents and were really close. Also, I'm very shy and didn't have any friends or people I regularly hung out with at school. Wanting to meet new people, I signed up for a salsa dancing club that met on Friday nights. I told my grandma over the phone, and she was happy I was putting myself out there. She asked if I was going with anyone. I said no. I'll just go alone, no big deal.
Are you sure?
She asked.
Don't any of your roommates want to go?
Talking to my roommates scared me. I was okay with planned events, but personal talks made me feel awkward. No, they're not here.
I don't want you walking around campus by yourself at night.
I thought my grandma was just being extra careful. Grandma, it's fine. The streets have good lights, and it's only a 10-minute walk. It's safe.
Well, if you're not going with anyone, call me. I'll talk to you on the phone while you walk back.
I said fine. That night was super fun. I was learning the basic dance steps and dancing to lively Latin songs. Then around 10:30, I felt like going back to my dorm, so I quietly left the building and walked towards my dorm. Even though there were streetlights along the way, but it seemed darker than usual. Plus, the whole campus was empty. Usually there were lots of people my age around, but that night there was no one. I called my grandma and chatted with her while I walked. I took off my heels and carried them in my hand. So now, the path I was on passed by a stretch of sidewalk that went in a different direction under a streetlight about 10 miles away. I saw a person standing with their back to me. They heard me talking on the phone and slowly turned towards me. This person was tall and big with wild red hair, and it looked like they were wearing light blue pajamas. But here's the weird part. Their face was hidden behind a clown mask. The mask was super white with really dark eyes and a mean-looking grin. It felt like time suddenly went very slow. The clown didn't come closer. He just stood there, staring at me. I knew I had to decide quickly. I thought about my choices. A, scream and run away like a scared kid. Or B, go up to him and ask what's up. Or C, act like he didn't scare me. The whole thing I just talked about didn't take more than a second, but it felt like forever.
Are you there?
My grandma asked on the phone. I remembered to breathe and kept the phone close. I decided to go with plan C and stopped looking at the clown.
What's going on? Is everything okay?
My grandma asked. Suddenly she sounded worried. I tried to act confident and casual, walking past the sidewalk where the clown was standing and still talking on the phone. Then his head slowly turned as I walked by, watching me until I was out of sight. I went into the archway of the closest building and tried the door, hoping it was open. Luckily it was. Once I got inside, I leaned against one of the concrete walls and couldn't hold back my tears. I told my grandma everything on the phone. My grandma shouted for my grandpa to call the campus police on his phone so I could stay on the line with her. Then I got up and started walking back and forth in the empty halls, checking every door and window to make sure the clown didn't follow me. Was he just a stupid kid doing a dare? Or was he someone with bad intentions? Some of those clowns in the news had weapons, like axes or baseball bats. I didn't know if that clown had something dangerous. When my grandpa tried to explain to the officer on the phone what happened and that I needed help, he said, "Your granddaughter needs to make the call herself." They wanted me to talk to them, so they could be sure the call wasn't a joke or some kind of prank. The important thing here is that they wouldn't believe my grandparents. I had to end the call with my grandma and then call the campus police myself. Then I told my grandma while crying, "I love you." She replied, "I love you too," while also crying. I called the campus police and explained who I was and what happened. While I was talking, I heard a door open. I got really scared. Was the clown here? Did he get in somehow? I felt a huge relief when several officers walked down the hallway. They walked with me back to my dorm. I called my grandma again to tell her I was safe. We chatted a bit more and then said goodnight. Since then, I've made a few friends at school. Although things are better for me now, I don't go out by myself after dark anymore. This is something that happened to me just a couple months ago. I really like Facebook. I enjoy looking at memes, chatting with new people, and reading long comment sections. However, I'm careful not to share personal details like where I live or work, and I keep my birthday private too. Despite not knowing them personally, I've made some friends on Facebook through good discussions or shared interests. So, when Tyler messaged me after we commented on a friend's post, it wasn't surprising. Our conversation started simple, just talking about the post, asking how we were doing, and sharing common interests. I was happy to make a new friend. He seemed interesting, and we had a lot to talk about. I'm not too pretty or anything like that, but I made sure he knew I was happily in a relationship. Even though I liked being friends, I let him know it wouldn't go beyond that since I'm getting married next year. He seemed a bit sad, but polite, which was good. I said goodnight, went to sleep, and didn't think much about it. We kept talking for a few days, but then he started to be a bit insistent if I didn't reply right away. I explained that I'm really busy and I might not always respond quickly. So I started to keep my distance because he didn't really back off. But I didn't want to totally give up on our friendship because I felt bad that he was so lonely. Then one day, he randomly messaged me, saying he wanted to hug me. I stopped him, reminding him about my relationship and telling him if he didn't stop, our friendship would be over. I'm very loyal and respectful to my fiancé. He got really upset and made threats toward him. I stopped messaging him and chose to ignore his messages. He could still message me, but it wouldn't go to my main inbox. I made a post about it, and a friend of mine commented saying he did the same thing to her. I got really scared and checked for more messages from him because she told me he was a trouble and I should call the police if he made threats. This is where everything got really bad. He messaged me many times saying different things. Then he talked about some random person annoying him on the road, and later he said he was going to hurt that person, blaming me for making him angry by ignoring him. I messaged him, telling him to leave me alone, but he didn't stop and kept asking for my house address. That really scared me as I never told him where I lived or anything close to my house. The only thing I mentioned was that I talked to him later because I was going to Arby's for some food. Somehow he knew I was 7 minutes away from the Arby's near my house, the same time it takes for me to walk there. Then he started figuring out the street where I lived, even knowing about a 4-door black car linked to my address. It was true, but not in my name. My sister registered it as an Uber. That scared me a lot, so I called the non-emergency number. But the police didn't do anything. They said unless he actually came or did something, they couldn't help. Even though he sent me pictures of people whom he hurt, threatened my family, and narrowed down my address, I felt stuck unless he showed up. The only thing I could do was get a protective order, so I did. My fiancé has a cousin who knows a lot about tech, so they somehow managed to find the last few addresses Tyler had. But the police couldn't locate him at any of those places. We had his license plate numbers, his address, full name, birthday, and more. But still, he seemed impossible to trace. He stopped bothering me for a while, but on the day of my court case to extend the protective order to 2 years, he started again. My fiancé decided to file criminal charges for the threats he made. Then one day, Tyler had said, someone could come hurt you in 15 minutes. And his last known address was exactly a 15-minute drive from my house. I was really scared to say the least. I've been terrified for the past few months. Finally, he was arrested and served. It turns out he has a history of doing these things. Many charges were dropped or dismissed. He did the same thing to a couple of my friends who came to support me in court for the criminal charges. They dropped everything from serious crimes to a smaller charge of disorderly conduct. With 12 months of possible jail time, they couldn't prove it was him and not someone else using the computer. Even though I never saw his face in real life before the court date, 2 people who got messages from him and saw him in person backed me up. I can't sleep well. The smallest noise makes me panic. It's been a terrible nightmare for me and my family, but I think I'm going to be okay. This happened last Halloween night when I decided to go for a walk in the woods at 9 p.m. since I had been sitting around all day. It was something I really enjoyed. Everything looked different in the dark. As I walked past my neighbor's house, they were having a big Halloween party. There were flashing lights in the windows, loud music, and I could also hear drunk people having fun in the yard. But soon enough, I reached the quiet woods, just like I had planned. As I walked through the forest path, I started feeling really nervous and scared. It was dark and I couldn't see well. I had to take my earbuds off to hear better and be more careful. The scared feeling went away a bit when I got out of the woods and onto a street near my home. I turned the corner to my street, put my earbuds back on, and played loud nightcore music. I started thinking I was stupid for getting scared about nothing, but then I saw a person come from behind the house and I got scared. They were really thin. I held my house keys between my fingers like I learned from the internet and tried to see who it was. It was a man, quite tall, bald, and wearing a black suit. He was really pale, and because I couldn't see well, I almost freaked out thinking it was Slender Man coming for me. But a moment later I saw that he did have a face and he had painted it to look like a skull. The man was really drunk and walking in a wobbly way across the empty street toward me. For a moment, I hoped he was too drunk to see me, but that hope went away as he came right to me. I was very scared and couldn't move. My house was only 2 houses away, but I had to get past this weird man, and I didn't know if I could run faster with my asthma. In a state of panic, I thought about ways to get away and be safe from him. Could I turn back and maybe take a longer way around to the other end of my street? Or should I go to my grandma's house? But I don't know if she's awake or even at home. While I was trying to decide, the man put his hand tightly on my shoulder, interrupting my thoughts. He started talking, but I couldn't hear him well because my music was still playing in my ears. All I could hear was him asking why a girl my age was out alone so late at night. I could only stand there and stare. Then the man stopped, lifted his arm, and pointed a finger to the woods behind the houses. At that moment, I thought if I didn't act soon, I might end up in trouble in the woods. I shook him off and I ran as fast as I could past him towards my house, while even crossing some of the property of the nearby house. At my front door, I was putting my key into the old lock with my shaky hands. I was scared that the man might come and grab me from behind, dragging me into the dark forest on the other side of my yard at any second. Finally, I got inside and made sure the door was locked before I could breathe again. I took off my shoes and went into the basement with tears rolling down my face as I was crying. I told my older brother what happened and we called our parents who weren't home at that time. They said they would check it out, but we didn't call the police because it was a small town and nothing really bad happened. The next day, my dad told me the drunk man was just a taxi driver in our town. We never talked about it again. I've shared this story with my friends a few times and it bothers me that I didn't even get an apology from that guy. I truly dislike the whole town and the fact that nobody does anything when things like this happen. Last year, me and my few close friends decided to check out the inside of an old house down the road. The house was at the end of a street and had a big messy yard with old cars that looked like they were very old and broken. The trees around the house were really big and part of the roof above the bathroom and the bathtub had caved in. It felt kind of creepy on the inside, with dark wood doors and windows that reminded us of a horror movie. Anyway, we found a hole in the fence and went into the yard to explore the place. We walked over fallen branches and old plant stuff until we reached the front door. It was locked. So a friend of mine climbed in through a window, came around, and unlocked the door for us. And that's when the fun started. From the moment we stepped inside the house, it was like we went back 35 years in time. There were old-style couches and furniture covered in dust and mold. There were no electronics whatsoever. No TVs or sound systems were there, but everything else from the owner's life was still there. It was almost like they just decided to leave one day and never came back. Then we headed to the bedroom. The bed still had old, smelly sheets on it. One drawer in the chest of drawers was open, and inside were some old clothes. When I lifted them, I found 3 harmonicas hidden underneath. They were in fancy and interesting cases, seeming quite valuable. Upon leaving the bedroom, we noticed some pictures on the wall. They were just stuck there without frames, and the corners were turning up because they were so old. One picture showed the house in its good times. The sun was shining, the lawn was neat, the trees were trimmed, and on the roof's edge, there was a man sitting and playing the harmonica. It was the same one I found. This picture must have been from the house's best days, when the man with the harmonica had built and taken care of it. So my friends and I decided to call him the Harmonica Man. And there I was, holding that heavy harmonica. It felt kind of sad to see this man's life in front of me, and holding what was probably his most loved thing. 2 of us went to the kitchen, and the other 2 went outside to check an old rounded caravan parked at the back. The kitchen looked like someone just left. There was no fridge or stove. There were cups, however, and plates in the cupboards. Old spice jars and a half-empty bottle of alcohol in one of them. I can't remember if it was wine, because back then I was young and not interested in drinking, thankfully. My friend reached for the whiskey, but the shelf it was on gave way. The bottles, plates, and everything else in the cupboard crashed down, making a loud noise. At the same time, a siren started blaring, like the one in the TV show series Lost. We rushed out, found the opening in the fence, and slipped through. Our 2 friends who had checked the caravan came running through the fence in a hurry. One of them had a bunch of magazines, and the other shouted, "Drop them!" So he dropped the magazines, and we all ran home as fast as we could. It turns out the magazines were old ladies' magazines from the 70s that someone had kept in the caravan on the old guy's land. It was a weird situation. Later, when we walked by where everything happened, the magazines were gone and the grass was cut. I learned that an old man next door owned the house. It makes me wonder why he left his things there and let it become so run down. He got the house from someone, maybe family, but he just left it there to get all messed up. When we came back the next day on our school trip, we saw that he had cut the grass. And not just that, like I said before. He picked up all the magazines my friend dropped in the front yard. It was strange knowing that someone sort of looks after the house or owns it, but it's still in bad condition.